Let's call this meeting to order. 1.02, let's do the pledge to the flag, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have roll call, please?
Yes, Jason Decker,
Present.
Mary Lee Hall,
Here.
Samantha Hall.
Here.
William Hall.
Here.
Jeremy Hash, Jennifer Henkel,
Here.
Nathan Henkel,
Here.
Lisa Stoller,
Here.
Joseph Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
Alrighty. 2.01, procedure for public comments. I do believe we do not have anyone for public comment. Is that correct? Alrighty. 3.01. What's that?
Sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. I wouldn't have seen that. 3.01, the board is going to receive a special education plan for review.
Thank you, Ms. Henkel. Just want to let the board and the public know that we have posted the special education plan, which will be for 2027 through 2030. We do have a 30-day window that by posting it publicly today, we will be able to have a review of this at the Thursday board meeting. Dr. Rogers will be speaking specifically to some of the areas of focus within that special education plan. And then the public would then have the amount of time to provide any feedback with that special education plan before we bring it back to the board in April for approval.
Thank you for that. 3.02, information regarding cursive writing and Chromebook use. Dr. Ruppert, Dr. Hughes.
Well, good evening, board. This evening, Dr. Hughes and myself, and we'll be joined by Mr. Greg Hunt in a moment. We're going to give a presentation this evening on cursive writing, as well as Chromebook use within the Sumner County School District. As we take a look, and we always want to revisit what our mission and vision is, so the Sumner County School District, through cooperative effort with the family and community, will provide a quality learning environment that promotes character, fostering responsibility, and challenges students to reach their potential. As well as our vision is of a dynamic organization that we will work in partnership with the family and community and will continuously strive to develop productive, contributing, responsible citizens to meet the global challenges, in meeting the global challenges of the future. So anything that Dr. Hughes and I, our administrators and teachers, focus on is how do we continually focus on, go back to our mission, go back to our vision as we're creating opportunities to have our students reach their full potential. So this evening, we just highlighted just some state updates. The first one regarding the special education plan that we will bring back to the board with a mini presentation by Dr. Rogers. Let me stand corrected. It's 2026 through 2029. I did say 2030 for the plan of the special education plan. It is every 3 years that we're required to create a special education plan, identify what the areas of focus on based on data and information we received from the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And then secondly, our comprehensive plan, if you think back, that was just 3 years ago. We're now getting ready to put our steering committee together for the fall to start to take a look at what are the benefits, what's our focus within our district, revisit what we had identified as our goals for the comprehensive plan that was the previous 3 years, and then fast forwarding to next March 2027 is where we will be bringing the comprehensive plan for approval. Our goal is to have it to the board in February for an opportunity to review and ask questions, but for approval then in March of 2027. So the first area of focus that we wanted to share with the board as well as the public is cursive writing. As we take a look at where the cursive writing has come from, House Bill 17 has provided that mandate that we do provide cursive writing instruction for our students. As we take a look at, what we do within our district, yes, we currently have our students working on handwriting, but that cursive writing is something that we believe is very valuable for our students in order to continue to, move forward and be those productive citizens within the community. Dr. Hughes will be speaking briefly about the implementation plan because as we've talked about the change process and when we're researching and identifying programs, we need to make sure that we provide the support not only for our teachers with the programs that we identify, but then also what that rollout and instruction would look like for our students. Dr. Hughes.
So one of the things that we want to start with is the idea our district always looks at how do we do things in the best way possible for our students, for our teachers, and for our community. So we don't want to ever just jump into something. We wanted to start by really looking at what's the research behind cursive writing. One of the things that we identified is that cursive writing actually started having started coming up in some conversations as we started looking at math. And we started looking at how the brain research is giving us about how kids learn. And we started finding research that says there is a different part of the brain that actually is activated when you start doing some of the computational pieces like cursive writing. And it really goes from print to a slanted italic to a cursive. So it's not even just going from one to the other. So we looked at research, and what we started identifying is that we know that there's a bill out there, but once again, we want to do this the right way. We want to really start by looking at programs and things and finding out what does the research say out there about cursive writing. So a couple months ago, before it even went into the House to be approved, it started coming forward in conversations. And we started reaching out and looking at what states already have some pieces in that they're using cursive writing. So one of the things that we found was from New Jersey and California, they were kind of had a guideline as to like when you started, how often should you do it, those types of things. So kindergarten and first grade is really about manuscripts. It's really about that print writing. Then when you get to second grade, somewhere between mid-second grade is when you start introducing some of those pieces to the cursive handwriting. Third grade is really getting into the mastery of it, and then application 4th through 6th grade. So we're really looking at how do we put this into effect using research-based practices. So as we started going through, we started looking at programs that were out there to say, hey, what's currently out there? Our program that we currently use, Houghton Mifflin Into Reading, has cursive writing that comes into second grade, and then it stops. So they kind of say you can add pieces from your teachers to this, but we really wanted to start looking at, okay, so what programs are out there that have research-based practices? Because not only do we know that cursive writing, that we're going to need a program to help us get into this, but we're going to need some professional development to help our teachers to understand this. One of the things that we've identified, I can remember as a student that I had cursive writing, and I can remember that in elementary school. Many of our teachers that are in our classrooms, it was gone by the time they went through. So we really wanted not just the formation of letters and the cursive, we're really looking at programs and professional development that will support the research behind the why. Why do we need to have cursive writing, and getting that for our teachers and helping to establish this. So we've looked at 8 programs right now, and we also identified that of those 8 programs, some of them would kind of not go with what we're currently using. So we didn't want to add something that was completely opposite what we're using. We wanted to look at something that would complement our HMH. So our reading specialist took all 8 programs. We have been very, the publishers sent us out for one for each school so that they could start going through them. Then they came together and kind of said, okay, this will work with our 95% and our HMH. 95%, once again, is our phonics program. So we were looking both areas to see what's out there. So they really have started to narrow it down to 3 programs right now for us to vet. So you'll see we came up with a timeline because once again, we know that we want to move on this quickly, but we want to do it correctly. So we're looking March and April to do a review. So we had our reading specialists go through. They did the initial evaluation of all 8 programs. They've narrowed it down to 3. And from there, we want to take it to a larger group that'll have core teachers in grades 2nd grade through 6 that can look at the program. Then what we'll do, so we're thinking that we'll bring it to the board in our May board meeting for approval. Then over the summer into the fall, we'll have the professional development. One of the things I've been reaching out to the companies and having conversation with is saying, do you have research-based information and professional development? And what we're finding is that some of the systems that they have actually layer on top of what we're currently using. So it wouldn't be another whole program. What they do is they help with the professional development, the training. Why do you need to do these pieces between print, italics, and cursive? So as we're going through, we're looking at professional development in summer with implementation starting when we come back to school. And then coming to next year, one of the things that you'll start seeing in our newsletters that we're very excited about, we've started putting student samples in. So Christina has some samples that'll be coming in April and May, where we're doing STAR student writing and reading and math. So you'll start seeing some of our student work samples coming in to see in our newsletters, but then we'll also come back at our education committee just to do another update then.
Dr. Hughes, when the committee took a look at those programs, what was the average cost between those 8 programs, or more specifically the 3 that it was narrowed down to?
So we're looking between around $35,000 to $71,000 is the price range of those programs.
And the other part I wanted to emphasize that Dr. Hughes noted on is many of these teachers did not have that instruction when they were in school. You know, if you're talking some of our newer teachers fresh out of college. So this is yet another layer of professional development instruction that we're going to have to teach. And they may not have had classes specifically about how to teach the cursive writing, that we're going to have to be able to provide that to our teachers with that research-based professional development to make sure, as Dr. Hughes said, that we're implementing a program, implementing something that our teachers are going to feel very supported with.
Are you able to tell us which 3 are under consideration?
Zaner Bloser is
Sorry,
one.
Zaner,
Zaner Bloser.
okay.
There is,
It's on the
the
side.
size doesn't matter, and that would be the OT. And then the third one was, well, I'm drawing a blank right now, it's Zaner Bloser, size doesn't matter, and the learning, handwriting without tears.
Question. Is there anything that we can get from the Ready to Learn block grant that would help cover this, even though it spans further past 2nd grade?
That I
That's a
don't-
good question.
That I wouldn't
We'd
know
have
the
to
answer. We
look
have to do a
into
little
that.
research on that.
I know there is also, we've been kind of keeping an eye on grants because the state said about a year ago when they introduced the new structured literacy requirements that there would be some grants coming out, but nothing has come forward. And we've been kind of checking, I've been checking in with our LIU just about every month to see if anything's out there. But Ms. Hall, we will definitely check into that.
Sure. Free money.
I have a question. Oh,
Yes, go
sorry.
ahead.
Just related to the cost question, I'm assuming this would not be a digital program. So then would the books be, like, would that be an annual cost?
So a lot of them, what they have is they have like a teacher's manual that would not need to be replenished every year, but then the student workbooks. And depending on the grade level, so when you look at like 2nd grade and 3rd grade, they actually have black line copies where you actually, you copy it from there, you like kind of do the form, and then they have writing sample areas. And then it goes up through then into journaling types of things. So there's some things that we were looking at, and even with having some conversations with some of the vendors, we were like, well, we wouldn't really need this journal, but we definitely would need these things. So we're looking to see the best cost savings, but still give us all of the information that we need.
Okay, and then one follow-up that's not related to cost. So you said that you were, that with the 3 that you were vetting, that you were looking for alignment with your phonics program. Can you just-
Phonics and our HMH.
Can you just like tell me what things you would be looking at for alignment? Because in my mind, I'm not making the connection of what
So
that would be.
one of the things with our 95%, and the reading specialists could do a much better job at this, but they do have letter formation in that and how letters go the sounds. So it all kind of goes together. So one of the things that they were looking at even was to see if 95% had like a cursive writing program that went with it, which they don't currently. But what we were looking at is really programs that would help extend what we're doing, really focusing on these key components with the brain research, but also then provide more opportunities for sample writing and those types of things.
Back on the cost, so I assume the 31 to 71, that's a first year cost.
Yes.
What, do you have any sense of what the ongoing?
I don't
Not
yet.
at all? Okay.
So
I
we
mean,
will-
like half or most of it, or?
At this point,
No,
I
you don't
really
have
don't
to.
know, and once we get down, since we just on Friday narrowed it down to the 3.
Gotcha, okay.
And I'm sorry to our teachers out there, because they haven't even heard of the 3 yet,
Oh.
that we narrowed it down to. But our reading specialists have been having conversations with teachers, so they know that this is coming and that we're examining things.
Okay.
But we'll be digging into then getting more specifically, like what would the 3-year cost and the 6-year cost, each of that.
Okay, thank you.
Above and beyond the scope that legislation has required us to adopt these policies, do you guys see in the future requiring any kind of curriculum change for high school so that it adopts what isn't mandated by the state, but like, let's say, note-taking in cursive or anything in the high school?
So one of the things that we've been having conversations across the board with, in the past, we use different note-taking strategies. So I know we've taught in the past how to use different like note-taking sheets. We've used Cornell notes, we've used, like there's a whole slew of different ones that we've taught in the past. Cursive writing, we will continue to have those conversations across the board. And I think as we start learning more and learning more about the research, because to be very honest, this started coming up as a conversation with math. But then it took new light once we identified that this is now a bill that's being passed, that we're like, okay, we really have to start looking at that cursive program. I'd like for us to get more research on the brain research behind it, and then build that up through our middle and high school as well. Because I think those are the pieces that we want to continue just the training behind. Why to do these pieces. And if we give people the why, then it becomes a little bit more of, oh, okay, let's implement this here. So I think we would look at this, see where it would naturally fit in different pieces.
That makes total sense. Thank you.
Any other questions with the cursive writing? I know we'll be coming back to the board. We're hoping as early as May, so that we can kind of get that program approved and then move forward with our professional development this summer, and then getting that rolling for the start of next school year. So the second component of our presentation this evening is on the Chromebook use and strategies. I know Mrs. Henkel, as well as Mr. Wilson, had asked at a previous board meeting for us to come back during the Education Committee and give an update to the board in how it's being utilized throughout the district. So regarding our instructional and classroom use of how the Chromebooks are being utilized, we do have the learning management systems that we currently utilize at our high school, which is Canvas. That's where our teachers have all their course material that their students can access. At the middle school level, our students use, at grade 7 and 8, are using Google Classroom. That's where the teachers have embedded, put their lesson plans, their assignments, et cetera, within the Google Classroom. But as a Google district, we know that all of our students have accessibility to whether it's Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, that they're utilizing, within their instruction. One of the key components here is teacher engagement. What I have seen, what Dr. Hughes and I have seen, is by having the accessibility of the devices and being mobile with them, we're able, during professional development, be able to do a lot more interaction, a lot more collaborative work while we're together. But then also with students, what I have seen, Dr. Bryson has seen as Dr. Hughes, for the times that we've been in classrooms where they have been utilized, let me just put it, where they have been utilized, students are using them for critical thinking, for collaboration in those senses. So I just wanted to highlight that.
So we wanted to start by just talking a little bit about the processes that we've already put in place. So this year, we really started taking a very deliberate approval process for our tech tools. And one of the things that we really do is that every time a tech tool comes through the department, it's already gone through about 6 layers. So our teachers start looking at it, they take it to their team. It then goes to their principal for approval. It comes to me where I look at it for educational value. At the elementary level, it goes through a whole principal review committee that has all of our administrators on it. And then it goes to our technology department to make sure that everything is safe. So it has a very rigorous review process. One of the things that we identified this year is that this review process has really narrowed down what we've been using, because we really want to make sure that everything we're using is for the right purpose. We want to make sure that our kids are using technology appropriately and responsibly. So as we move forward, one of the things that we started looking at, and I wanted to share this with you because when we started putting this together for the board, I reached out to our teachers and I said to them, listen, I really apologize, but I only have like a day. I'm putting together different tools. Please don't kill me, but if you could please just send over some different ways that you use technology in the classroom. Literally by the end of the day, I had probably 40 different emails. So I took a lot of the pieces that they had sent to me and put them together to kind of show what we're doing at the high school, middle school, and elementary. I wanted you to see kind of what types of things are being used in the classroom. So the first thing we're going to start with is mathematics at the high school level. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bryson for a minute to talk a little bit about math and the reasons for some of the tools that we use there.
Wasn't expecting that, but I can jump in. Some of my math instruction and use of technology goes back to literally my first year on the job, which was 1995, believe it or not. We had geometry sketchpad, and I believe the use of technology in the area of mathematics, we tend to believe that kids are, what we use it for is kids do problem sets and fill in the blanks, click on A, B, or C. And really good instruction around the area of mathematics with technology is about the manipulation of figures and creating some hands-on visuals that can connect to the actual math. So here's an example. Does anybody remember, don't say it out loud, you can just shake your head whether you remember it or not. The total angles of a triangle all total a certain degree. Do you remember what that degree was? And so we typically in our own math classes would have memorized that, right? But if you put a kid on, for example, this is 30-year technology, a kid on Geometry Sketchpad, they can literally click on one of the vertices and drag that, and the triangle changes shape. It's still a triangle, but it goes into all different shapes. And you put a measurement spot on these angles, they actually see the degrees change as they're dragging it. And quickly they realize if you add them all up, what do you get? 180. And no matter how you drag that, you're going to get 180 as long as you maintain a triangle. And quickly you get square, you can quickly drive through figures and they can play with them and experience, you know, what those different rules are. And then we can talk about why. I can't do that on a paper pencil. And you can see some of the figures there, they're not using geometry sketchpad anymore. Probably a good thing. But concept being the same, transformations, cylinders, you can do a lot with the technology to actually engage the kids in learning what the rules are versus just memorizing them or trying to create 18 triangles on a piece of paper and getting the protractor out and measuring them to discover that it always adds up to 180. So there's an efficiency behind it. You experienced a presentation previously on mathematics instruction and the concept of teaching the concrete to the abstract. And I don't even want to say Chromebooks, the device that you're utilizing with the right program can allow us to do that quickly and also create a concrete example in their minds that we're not trying, to recreate on a 2-ply piece of paper. So that would be my best example of either middle school or high school use. But even at the elementary, I think later in the presentation, even at the elementary, they might use a number line, which they can manipulate the number line with figures and do it quickly versus potentially trying to draw out numerous number lines. And they can drag that point on the number line and look at what happens with their different distances, et cetera. So I think those are a couple simple but yet concrete examples.
So a lot of what you're seeing, I put up one here. These are different tools that actually come from our program that we purchase right now. They're not meant to be the lesson. It's a part of a toolbox that they provide to allow students and teachers to pick and choose what they want to use, especially if you have students that are maybe struggling a little and you need just a different way of really helping them understand. So one of the things that, this is the area of mathematics. Wanted to show you a couple examples of social studies.
So within social studies, this one's for the high school. You know, with the high school, our students have had years of utilization of the different programs, et cetera. And the one thing that I have seen going into classrooms, Dr. Hughes, is that collaboration, the critical thinking, looking at primary, secondary resources. But I think the unique piece that we have seen, which are some of the pictures we put up here, is how our students are creating multimedia presentations based on information of school-wide events or specifically within their content area. And in the middle school, now this was something that I thought was something I wish I had the opportunity to take a look at. When you look at the virtual tours, the virtual museums, virtual tours, it does give a student the ability to really take a look at maybe what's currently an artifact that has just been unearthed, okay? That might not be in that textbook. Whereas, like the virtual tours, we're able to take a look at, what the civilization may have looked like years ago to what it looks like now. And the students can kind of take a look at the population density, how things may have changed over time, which does provide them that visual opportunity. And then in the kindergarten, which I thought was pretty cool, where the students were doing some historical research. There's a graphic organizer you can see that they're writing on, but they're getting information about George Washington. And now they're going to have some information that they've gathered about George Washington that they're putting on that graphic organizer to utilize in class. So just a couple areas of how they're utilizing the Chromebooks as they're doing research.
Okay, moving into science, we wanted to kind of show, you'll see one standard application across all science classrooms, and it's simulations. One of the things that you'll see at the secondary level, we use some different equipment and things that actually tracks the information and makes it real world. You'll notice also simulations, once again, at our high school level. At our elementary and our middle school level, when we use open science education, They have simulations, once again, in here. In this case, it was a bird feeder, where you look at traits, track inheritance traits, and analyze patterns of offsprings. And then also at the elementary level, we have some different simulations that are in the eco water system. These are always in addition to the labs and the other hands-on opportunities that our students have, but it's just a different format. Once again, just like with cursive writing, it activates a different part of the brain.
And looking then at our secondary English, I know the board, you had approved the Houghton Mifflin program. Was that 2 through or 3 through 8?
3 through 8 will be coming eventually for K through 2 with this new.
And how it's being utilized at the middle school level is your end of unit assessments that are being utilized. But if you take a look at other ways that it may be utilized, is that research that students are doing at the secondary level, whether it's grade 7, 8th grade social studies, but now we're talking specifically English, as they're working on the research paper, being able to identify information, get primary resources that they may not have accessibility to in our libraries for those projects. So it does give also our teachers the ability for quick data. Many of them do entrance tickets, exit tickets, just to grab some quick data about what the students to activate learning as well as at the end of the classroom. So just some quick ways that teachers can get some quick data, see where the students are, what they might have to reteach that next day as they have multiple classes coming through. And in ELA, in the elementary, this one I thought was pretty neat. They're researching animals. That's what the students were doing. And being able to pull together, specific, I'll go back one because that one's on this. But then they're writing about that topic, and they're doing an informational essay about that topic on the animals. So they're researching, gathering that information. You can see the students are writing the information down onto their graphic organizer to create that informational writing.
And you can see this is an example of what the students are using for another research that they have, like note sheets. So teachers are teaching the skill of note-taking as they're going through. So the kids have different, we use PebbleGo right now as being one of our resources where kids can get information, and then they're transcribing it into what we would say note cards to help them get ready for research projects as they move forward. As we look at the high school for our library, once again, you'll see research is one of the main areas that we've been using a lot of our devices with. A lot of the things, it's the encyclopedias of when I was growing up. I had one in our house. They don't have them anymore. They are all now in an electronic format. So research is really what we find is good educational sites for us to be able to go to so that we're able to then get current and very research-based information that is accurate. But then also looking into other classes. So in our family consumer science class at the middle school, we, as part of our Project Lead the Way program that we have, they have the ability to create a house, and it goes through allowing them to create, scale, model, and do some of the different components. A lot of students will start by doing a rough sketch of it on just like the design thinking iteration. You start with doing your brainstorming and then drawing it out, and then going, once you have something that you're kind of looking at that final product, then putting it into the system to see how it really, whether it meets the structural integrity and other pieces that are needed. In our elementary, this is one that I'm very excited about. Our elementary, across all three of them, we have been a partner with code.org for many years. And we're very excited because it starts in kindergarten and first grade where students learn about coding without even touching a computer. They learn how to code. We have starting with blocks that they start with, and then it goes into little training things that they create. And then it gets into our upper grades. We start looking at, okay, how do you put that into the system? There's different activities that they do, and they learn about coding through doing, we have Dash&Dot robots. But the thing that's really neat about this is, first of all, seeing the enthusiasm of the children but also seeing some of the different products that they come up with. In the last example, if you see, we use Tinkercad here. If you see the little pumpkin that they created. So the students created pumpkins, then created a coded for the robot to take a bucket that had the pumpkins in it and go through a design area to take it to a new location. So we're really looking at how do we use this for multiple viewpoints and helping our students really look. Once again, this is one type of activity that they do. It would be a part of our library program. And when we get to those standards, we hit these pieces. In addition, you can see in other grade levels, they've done everything from designing spinners, they've done windows through 3D printing. But one of the things that's really neat with this is that we've also had students that have done the design iteration to say, here's a problem. How can we come up with a solution to this? And our students have been given different problems, and they've come up with some really interesting things. And then finally, by the idea of creating multimedia, in the case on the left, they create their actual videos that go for morning meetings, where they will, students have their work that actually, and they do like presentations to the school. And then on the right, they use Canva to create a design of, if you were going to this place, what could you learn about this place, and then what types of information would you want to share with the rest of your friends and family? So they actually had the research. In this case, it was a trip to Mexico, and then they shared some information about what they would have seen there. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit, because this is another area that we are currently excited about and we're moving forward with. So as we've been vetting programs, one of the things we identified is, I'll go back to that free is never free. And we identified that the typing program that we were using did not meet our requirements. We felt that it was collecting some information, though it didn't collect student names or anything like that. It just had too much information because it was the free one. And it started having ads that would come up, so we're like, no. So we've been vetting different programs. We have 3 of them that we're vetting right now: Typing Club, Type-C, and Typing.com. Our librarians have been using these with a group of students to see which ones are the best. And I have to tell you, I was in the classroom the other day, I was in a meeting, and I heard the kids out in the library all like yelling. So I was like, I gotta go see what they're doing, because they were cheering. And I went out, and they were actually using Type-C, which is apparently coming to and bubbling to the top with our librarians. The kids actually, I don't know if you've ever seen the Hatchimals, but every time they actually do the correct thing, and they get to the end of a sentence and they use the typing components correctly, they hatch an animal. So these students were all hatching these animals, and one of the things that I loved, they had some kids, I was talking to them, and one of the students said, I said, what's so exciting about this? And the student replied back to his teacher and myself and said, I'm learning more about my spelling. And I thought that was just, like, not only was he learning about the correct typing procedures, but he identified that he was learning better spelling habits. So just one more thing that we're excited to look forward to. We'll be bringing this probably in May as well to the board for us to move forward with trying to have something that really helps us with typing skills.
I have just like a quick follow-up on the math piece of it. So I know you were saying that when you were talking, when you started to have conversations about Cursive, it came up through math. So I'm just wondering, like, I wouldn't normally put those two things together. So what was it that came up?
With the typing?
With Cursive and math, like what
So,
is the?
Because of the brain research that's out there and how it's computational understanding. So we're really looking, because we're moving and trying to understand algorithmic thinking and computational understanding with math, the research started coming up, and our math coaches are amazing. They keep like digging and digging. And one of our math coaches came and said, hey, there's research that's now linking computational thinking, not just in math, but in writing, in reading, and how it all goes together, because it's all brain research.
So to go into one of our last sections before we turn it over to Mr. Hunt, testing resources, because I know we have talked about how our district utilizes the devices for testing. Not all testing is done on our devices, but some of them that are being done, I referenced, are entrance exit tickets that some of our teachers utilize for, quick data on the teachers. But we do know that that is something that our teachers can hand to students, and students can complete those and turn those in. But that's an example. Diagnostic assessments, we use the classroom diagnostic tool. That is an assessment that we use in math, ELA, and science from the upper elementary into the high school. And that focuses on what standards our students need to focus on within the areas of instruction, so our teachers can, differentiate the instruction, but more importantly, put students in grade level groups in those classrooms they can provide small group instruction in those areas. The other areas of assessment that we all know, all of our state assessments have moved online. Just wanted to share that with everyone. We do have a testing window, which I do want to note that we do have a testing window of 15 days for the assessments, where our ELA is 3 days of testing, grades 3 through 8. Our math is 2 days of testing, grades 3 through 8. Or is it 4 through 8? 3 through 8. And then our science is 2 days of testing in grades 5 and grade 8. So I just wanted to highlight that. And obviously the Keystones, we have fully moved over to online this year with the secondary, with the high school. The middle school had done online for the algebra Keystones previously, but now as a district, as well as a state, everybody is online with the assessments at this time. Greg, turn it over to you.
All right, so we've received a couple questions over the past couple months about how we've gotten to where we are with Chromebooks. So I want to do just a real quick brief overview of our history of Chromebooks in the district. Why did we choose Chromebooks? This goes back to when we first became a Google district, and being a Google district, Chromebooks being manufactured and a Google product pretty much, they fit very perfectly into our environment. We were looking for something that was centralized with centralized management. We're going to have 3,000 plus devices in the district, staff and students. We don't want to touch everything every time we need to make a change. So that checks the box, being managed by the Google Admin Console. Zero touch deployment, being able to have them as classroom ready out of the box. We don't really have to touch them when they come in. We can roll them out. Allows us more time in the summer to be able to go around and get the teachers in the classrooms ready for the next school year. Seamless user roaming. If a student breaks a device, needs a loaner, forgets theirs at home, they can pick up another one, sign right in. There's no interruption. Works exactly like the one that they had before. And as far as the secure testing environment, it's natively built into Chrome or the Chromebooks, and it works perfect for standardized testing. For the Chromebook adoption process, the rollout actually took many years to get to where we are right now. It wasn't a quick decision, and a lot of time and planning went into it. And along the way, we've learned a lot of different things, such as the pros and cons of buying versus leasing, deployment methods of building rollouts versus grade rollouts. So going back to 2015, that was our first rollout to the students. That went to high school. They went full one-to-one. The following year, we did full one-to-one at the middle school. And then in 1920, we rolled out to the elementary schools. And that was a mixed ratio enrollment. Grades 4 through 6 were one-to-one. Grades 2 through 3 were 2-to-1. And grades K to 1 were 3-to-1 with in-classroom use only. Then came 2020, and everything kind of changed. The pandemic hit, and we transitioned to full one-to-one K to 12. We were one of the lucky districts that were able to kind of pull that off from the get-go. There were a lot of other school districts that were not able to do this. We had the additional devices to be able to hand them out to any student or family that needed them. And then moving into the 2021 school year, we were able to purchase some. We got in early for the purchase program, or the purchases through our vendor, before they ran out, and we were able to go full one-to-one for the 2021 school year. This allowed for instruction to continue and support between teachers and students during the shutdown. And then as we moved out of the pandemic, we were on a building level refresh that we quickly noticed became very unsustainable, with the highs being very high, the lows being very lows. From a budget standpoint and enrollment standpoint, it was very unpredictable. So we actually changed over to a grade level distribution. And in 23-24 was the very first year that we rolled that out. We started purchasing, instead of for entire high school, entire middle school, elementary, we purchased for first grade, fifth grade, and ninth grade. This allowed us to basically look at the enrollment levels very closely to where we're going to purchase it, not have to estimate 4 years out. In middle school, if we were purchasing for them, we would have to look at fourth grade and estimate their enrollment numbers come seventh grade, eighth grade, and sometimes that changed dramatically. Sometimes we had devices sitting on the shelf waiting to be used when that larger fourth grade class hit the middle school. So now the devices stay with the students for 4 years. And it really kind of fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility with the students. We actually saw more care being taken of the devices, less breakages, and they just kind of treated it like their own instead of being just something that they would use for a few minutes, throw it back on the cart. They would actually take care of it. They would wrap up their cords. They would put it in their bags. So breakages went down a lot. This 4 year cycle also lines up with our warranty that we have for repairs. And then 2 years later, as we have on the chart, in 25-26, we moved to the 2-to-1 ratio in K-4. So essentially from 5 to 12, nothing really changed. In K-4, we flipped the model. We purchased for half of the fourth grade class. The reason that we did this instead of purchasing for first is because the numbers that we were looking at, the data we were looking at, showed that grades 3 and 4 were using more screen time. They had PSSA testing. So we wanted to make sure that they had the new devices coming in, and then they cycled down all the way through kindergarten. And every year we purchased for half of grade 4. So I know a question came up at the last board meeting of how did we get to the 550 number this year that we're talking about. That is the current fourth grade for this year. It is the current fourth grade plus the current eighth grade plus 50% of the current third grade, which actually comes out to 530. And then when you add in 3% for enrollment variations and breakages, it actually comes out to 546. When we first did the calculations, it was like 549.8. So as time goes on, we've already shifted a few numbers down. And moving into the procurement landscape. I'm sure everybody's heard about the AI tax that's been going into everything. So it's really starting to look really volatile. Manufacturers are starting to divert a lot of their production towards AI, which is causing a part shortage and it's causing prices to jump. Right now, it's about 15 to 30% since January on certain parts. This is also causing a shrinking of the supply. Chromebooks are really starting to dwindle down on through vendors. Intel actually came out and said that they don't have any chips. They're not able to provide them for Chromebooks at all the way through 2026 and possibly into 2027. So a lot of districts and customers are having to go over to a company called MediaTek, and that line is already super long, causing longer lead times. I've been talking to a lot of the districts around here, and they've been getting reports of up to 16+ week deliveries based on the model that they've been quoted. Some of them have actually had their orders be canceled, and they've had to re-quote a different model and go from there. Quotes are also really starting to shrink down. We used to be able to get 30 to 60-day quotes. Now some people are even just quoting 14 days because the price is changing so fast that they can't guarantee the 30 to 60 day. And yeah, with talking to the other districts, everybody pretty much has their own purchasing horror story over the past couple months, and unfortunately, it's projected to just keep getting worse.
So are you saying from the time that you order 16 weeks on top of that?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understood
Yes.
it. Okay.
So to close things out, I just wanted to say something just to our staff. You know, a professor of mine said, the front line determines the bottom line. And our teachers are the ones that are day in and day out, they're preparing these lessons. I'm not just talking with the Chromebook, but they're preparing the lessons, get a contact from Dr. Hughes and from their principals about pulling together how to utilize it. Our teachers continue to, you know, exceed the expectations. And I wanted to say out to the teachers that may be out there listening right now, we appreciate you. Because we know that whenever there's a change, there's concern about when that change happens, how's it going to impact me? And we do know that there are things that have impacted our teachers, and it may as other mandates do come down. But the more we take things into consideration, slow things down, and have our teachers be a voice, be part of that change process, it'll be a lot easier because our teachers are going to, and our administrators are really going to open up to that because they're part of that entire process. But I wanted to say something to the teachers just because of how they quickly pulled together some of those examples, Dr. Hughes, for the presentation. So do we have any questions for ours at this point? I know we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Henkel and Mr. Wilson.
Just one for Mr. Hunt. You said that it's bad and getting worse in terms of availability of Chromebooks, and it's expected to get worse for a while. I mean, when you say for a while, do you have anyone giving projections about how long that's expected to last?
Not really until the AI bubble pops.
I mean, years, potentially?
It's potentially a year, 2 years. Nobody really knows, honestly. I've heard upwards of 2 to 3 years before things actually start to stabilize. It's not looking the best.
So that's something we need to be considering, not just for right now, but that the shortages may be a thing that we have to deal with 2 or 3 years out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one of the questions, being asked on Wall Street of a lot of these chip makers that have been some of the high flyers is how long will this AI ordering frenzy continue? And some people think we're late stages, but you just don't know how long.
Well, and we need to be prepared for the idea that it's going to last for a bit yet. Even if it is a bubble, could be another 2 or 3 years. We have to be ready for that we may have to consider, okay, what do we do in a world where we can't get everything we want?
The market can stay irrational longer than we can stay solvent. Right?
Thank you so much.
I have one more question, sorry. So I know that we were looking to, and you did a good breakdown of like how we arrived at the 550 number. So we get 550 this year. Are we on alternating years of purchase? I'm just trying to understand to what President Henkel was saying, like, what's after this order? Does that come again in a year, 2 years?
Yes. No, this is every year.
Every year?
Every year we deploy to grades 4, 5, and 9, with 4 being half the enrollment because they're for the carts and then they cycle down to kindergarten.
Right, so that number that you gave me, that applies every year, like half the 4th grade class? All
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, the number will vary every year based
Right,
on
but
enrollment.
the, like,
Yes.
formula?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us to 3.03, information regarding educational technology use, and I will take it away to myself.
Yeah. Work with you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You're up first.
Well, let's both go.
Okay, good evening, board, good evening, administration, public. I'm gonna turn it over to Jim.
So we wanted to introduce, and it sounds like it would be a negative in relationship to what was just presented. I understand that ed tech has its place. There are lots of positives, lots of things that our district has done that's phenomenal, and I want to be more in cooperation with teachers and admin and staff and less adversarial, but there are dangers. And so we have a lot of information. It's going to be coming your way. I know that we'll probably want to have discussion afterwards, and we can do some of that, but I'd also like to tie over some of that to Thursday's board meeting as well. digest the information, take it home with you. We'll provide all the links. It's actually rather hard to keep track of the links because literally today, other studies and research have been coming out. And so we're trying to maintain some semblance of cohesiveness when it comes to our messaging. But every day, news articles are coming out. It's crazy. So we'll provide all of those to the district. We'll provide all of those to the board members. But we just wanted to start out with, as we were reading this book, The Digital Delusion, which is by Dr. Horvath, what seemed to kind of be the most cohesive symbolic thing, and that was teach someone how to use a tool and they'll be able to use that tool. Teach someone how to think and they'll be able to use any tool. And that directly corresponds to something that education has known for a while, and that's the same as learn to read so that you can read to learn, right?
Okay, so I do want to start out similar to what Dr. Repper had just said. This conversation is not about blame. It's not about fault. It's literally, we want to talk about where are we today? What does the data say? This isn't about a culture war or banning books or banning Chromebooks or whatever. This is about being high rigor, not anti-tech. This is literally our moonshot, and it's what we are, kids. Jen referenced one book here. I know this book has started to make the rounds as far as the administration goes, The Digital Delusion. Another one by he's not a doctor, Jonathan Haidt. This is mostly focused on social media, the advent of the phone-based childhood, and how that has contributed to the mental illness that we see in a lot of our adolescents today. Both are very good reads. I would highly recommend them to anybody, anyone in education, any parent. I've found them very valuable. So, middle of January,
Okay.
you got it?
Yeah, so, in early January, Dr. Horvath and Emily, is it Shurkin? Is that Dr.
Shurkin, yeah.
Shurkin. They actually were able to testify before the Senate, and it was all about the dangers of ed tech and screens earlier this year. So we thought that it would be the opening of that testimony. We could go ahead and.
Thank you, Dr. Horvath. My name is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. I'm a former teacher turned cognitive neuroscientist who focuses on human learning. And I do not receive funding, nor have I ever, from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Since we've been standardizing and measuring cognitive development since the late 1800s, every generation has outperformed their parents, and that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition. Congratulations, you see your correlation. Until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention, to memory, to literacy, to numeracy, to executive functioning, to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? It can't be school. Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had enough time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that learning. Across 80 countries, as Jean was just saying, if you look at the data, once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly, to the point where kids who use computers about 5 hours per day in school for learning purposes will score over 2/3 of a standard deviation less than kids who rarely or never touch tech at school. And that's across 80 countries. Bring it home to the US, let's go to the US. We have our NAEP, that's our big data. Take any state, here's a fun experiment you can try. Take any state NAEP data, compare that to when that state adopted one-to-one technology widely, and watch what happens. The NAEP data will plateau and then start to drop. Now, as Jean said, of course, this is all correlative. What we really want is causative. To get causation, what you need is academic research and you need mechanisms, explanations for why we're seeing what we're seeing. Luckily, we have academic research stretching back to 1962 that shows the exact same story for 60 years. When tech enters education, learning goes down. In fact, one of the biggest ed psychologists right now, Dylan William out of the UK, recently said, ed tech is a revolution that's been coming for 60 years. And we're gonna have to wait another 60 because it ain't doing anything. Now that's research, but now we need mechanisms. Luckily, over the last about 2 decades, we've been doing a lot of work in what we call the science of learning. How do human beings learn? And we now have the clear understanding of why tech does not work for learning, and it is all biological. It's not that the tech isn't being used well enough, we haven't been trained enough, we need better programs. It's we have evolved biologically to learn from other human beings, not from screens. And screens circumvent that process. I won't go too deeply into the mechanisms, they can get boring, but just know they're there if you want to talk about them. So that leaves us with 2 options. Option 1, when you know something is wrong, do better. So we could just say, hey, mea culpa, get some of this tech out of schools, go back to what we know works, some analog methods, cool. Or 2, we could redefine our terms. We could redefine what it means to be an effective learner. I want to end with one quick story here. Think back to your childhood, to your schooling. I guarantee all of us at one point took a test on reading comprehension. And the way it looked is this. Here's a passage of about 750 words. Here are 10 to 12 questions about that passage. Most of them are inferential, not factual. They're asking you to go beyond what you just read to see what you understood. Cool. Last year, the SATs had a reading comprehension section. Here's what it looked like. Here is a single sentence of 75 words. Here is one question, fact-based, about that sentence. Next. Here is another sentence of 75 words. Here is one question about that sentence. Next. Last year, they redefined reading comprehension to mean 54 short sentences with one question about each. That is skimming. That's not reading. Why would we ever do that? Because what do kids do on computers? They skim. So rather than determining what do we want our children to do and gearing education towards that, we are redefining education to better suit the tool. That's not progress, that is surrender. So as we go through our discussion today, there's going to be a lot of talk about smartphones and social media, rightly so. But I'm the voice here to remind you that even in schools, it doesn't matter what the size of the screen is, if it's a phone, if it's a laptop, if it's a desktop, and it doesn't matter who bought it. Is it school sanctioned? Does it have the word education stamped on it? It doesn't matter. All of these things are also going to hurt learning, which in turn are going to hurt our kids' cognitive development, right at the time when we need our kids to be sharper than we are. So thank you guys so much for today. I look forward to talking with you all.
Alrighty, so we see in media, and these are just 4 of what we've already highlighted, various articles that come up. I mean, it's textbooks will always beat screens, parents opting their kids out of school laptops. The U.S. spent $30 billion to ditch textbooks. And then, was this last week, was the Baltimore one, or was the week before?
Yeah, it was March 5th.
Yeah, so Baltimore's
Week
top
and a half.
educator wants to end the iPad kid epidemic. I won't belabor the point, we'll include all the links later. In research, and this is where it gets interesting, EdTech is failing our kids for the same reason that what we adopted as whole word reading failed them. It was a fun marketing ploy, not based in real research or reality. And that's because adults learn differently than children do. We, as adults, can top off our skills or supplement our learning, but that is wholly different from learning from an absolute start from scratch. So we've got things like the JAMA Network Open Study. They found that students aged 11 through 18 use smartphones for over 2 hours, 1/3 of the school day, and remember that's just an average, some are worse, some are better. The key takeaways from that study was habitual phone checking. We're not just talking about total screen usage during the day, we're talking about just checking because of your notifications. That's a key factor in academic distraction, and it correlates with lower cognitive control, which is literally the ability to manage attention and resist distractions. Then we get into the screen inferiority effect, which comes into play with screens versus paper format reading. Digital overconfidence makes readers feel like they're more familiar with concepts than they really actually are. We'll focus more on this later with the pitfalls of what we call exposure learning versus real cognition. In addition, paper text offers that tactile spatial cues, both the flipping of the pages and the feel of your hands, not to mention engaging the part of the brain that demands a home for concepts to live. Dr. Hughes and I have actually been in conversation together, and she's been talking to me about the research that she's been doing, and I loved the idea that she had said a couple meetings back about how kids, when it comes to abstract learning, they need something to have tangible to make those, kids don't think in the abstract. It's not home for them, and so they need that sort of thing to really be able to understand principles and concepts. In contrast, text on a scrolling screen, that concept doesn't live anywhere. When you're reading on a screen, the place that word that you really liked lives, well, it's at the top of the screen when you start, then it's at the middle, then it's the bottom. Your brain needs to be able to map where a thing lives so that it can recall it. And recall and recognition is harder when it doesn't live somewhere where your brain literally cannot map. The most recent data compiled shows reading on screens leads to more shallow processing, and it can hinder reading comprehension, but also that students were unaware of their own reading behaviors. They didn't reflect much on the different mediums used, and again, they felt overly confident about their comprehension on digital devices to a degree that did not match reality. They thought through exposure learning that they knew a concept, and when they were tested later, they didn't. They didn't know. Again, the pitfalls of exposure learning. Go ahead, where's the next one?
Oh, mine's the next one?
Oh, wait, no, that's me.
Okay.
In culture, so this is kind of fun. Joe put this together. So one new movie that hasn't come out yet that you should check the trailer for is Toy Story 5. And guess who the main villain in Toy Story 5 is? Screens, the iPad. Even culture is catching up to the fact that screens are not all they cracked up to be. And screens, even in the context of educational learning, still the bad guy. And then, do you want to talk about the other one?
Sure, the other one, good luck, have fun, don't die, is literally what's going to happen when AI actually takes over the world, the singularity that we talk about so much. And a guy comes back from the future to try and prevent it happening. And it's a pretty crazy movie. I recommend it. Now, I know Mr. Hunt captured this pretty well, but we didn't compare notes before our presentations this evening, obviously. But very similar things. We wanted to reference that, yes, when we started bringing in the one-to-one devices, total costs, estimated costs to date, we've spent about $2.5 million-ish on this so far. So that's just from what I can see in board records. Now, what have we gotten for it? Dr. Horvath referenced the NAEP data. This is not Pennsylvania's data. This is the average of every state in the United States. This shows that no matter where you are, the exact same thing happens. This is grade 4th math and reading. You'll see the line here is when you lock into digital one-to-one devices. Now, NAEP data is only captured every 2 years, so the slopes are a little bit more pronounced than you would see on like PSSA data or PVAS data. So you can see that in 4th and 8th grade, very similar results. As soon as a state adopts one-to-one technology, they can count on losing about 1 to 2 points of proficiency a year. This is our PVAS data. I picked 2018, 2022, and 2025. Really mixed results. Obviously, PVAS data compares where we are in relation to our neighbors. So it's a little where everybody else is, where are you compared to everybody else. We have some bright spots, we have some, needs some work. So not really as conclusive. So we did take a look at the PSSA data, grouped these together, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, math and English. Obviously, as Dr. Ruppert mentioned earlier, PSSAs, we only test science in 5th and 8th. So as you can see very clearly, there is a drop around 2020, 2021. Now, if it was just COVID, if it was just the not being in school, if it was just the change of model, that our ELA scores would come back up. But how we taught reading had fundamentally changed, it looks like. You can see the same, not as pronounced in our 5-6 data, but you will see that overall it is a downward trend in both math and English. And 7 and 8, 7 and 8 is kind of really up and down. Not even sure what to say about that. But, I mean, obviously, 7th and 8th grade, that's when we came in actually earlier with our one-to-one devices than we did in 5-6. So maybe there's an influence there that, you know, we're seeing in the data and just the inconsistency.
So changes made to date. As you know, we have already implemented a 2-to-1 Chromebook in K through 4 to reduce screen time among our younger students, and we have ongoing monitoring for screen time and all the apps that we do. How's it going?
Well, we recently got an updated sheet of, you know, Chromebook, averages for our different buildings. We can compare them to last year's numbers. See that there is a lot of positive here and reduction of screen time during the school day. There are some outlying data points that, you know, I did highlight in here just to, you know, there may be something there we may want to take a little bit more of a look at because they were kind of counter to the overall trend. And 7th and 8th grade, you know, we're still really close to 2+ hours a day for a lot of our students in 7th and 8th grade.
So what parents are saying. The board received an email, and Joe actually contacted the person and asked if we could use some of the information, and so I'll just go ahead and read portions of it. One parent emailed recently about Chromebook changes and virtual days. She said, and I quote, "I also do love the switch to not having to bring Chromebooks home every day. When the kiddos brought their laptops home, it seemed like there was always a fight trying to get them to put down their Chromebooks. So I'm a fan of no more unnecessary screen time." And then later she said, "I did just want to pass along how those two small changes made such a big impact."
And from conversation with another parent, they have 2 kids in the district, 2 more about to come in. And their concern is they basically had to block YouTube from their router level at the home because of the device. Somehow, 13-year-old daughter is just unable to unglue herself from it when she gets home, in spite of the parents trying to reduce screen time. Also, seems to have trouble with using scratch paper to solve math problems, which has told, you know, apparently the teachers have told the child to use a calculator on the computer. So, again, I don't know exactly where to go with that. But these are the experiences our parents are having with devices. The addiction of a screen is real. And it doesn't matter what size the screen is. If your kids have a cell phone, you've got to be really careful. If they've got an iPad, same deal. Any screen can be addictive, no matter who bought it.
All right, digital learning can't make the grade. Joe had already talked about the addiction of screens, any screens, and as we know, dopamine fuels addiction. Well, what fuels the dopamine? Gamifying platforms. When you have a reward that is linked to that thing that you do, even if it's of educational value, the immune system, biologically, all of it, your brain gets a dopamine hit. Kids like that dopamine hit, adults like that dopamine hit. And so it's this vicious cycle. No wonder the person that emailed us before said that, you know, it was a fight with the Chromebooks to constantly put them away. Well, it's because children are addicted. And whereas we might not, with our averages, have kids be excessive, it's screen time that's in educational fields, but then it's also the screen times that they're having at home too. And so we need to be very cognizant of how much screen time kids are on, and then how much we're responsible for just in our district. Screens are not neutral. Just because you're using them for educational purposes doesn't mean that your body isn't having all of the psychological effects of a screen. Excitement about an app does not equate skills. And that just brings us back again to the exposure learning. You know, when psychologists go back and they test people that think that they know a concept, sure, they were exposed to it, but that doesn't mean that they have actual abilities and skills that go with that. And then some of the things that we have on this slide, reading comprehension is consistently worse on screens than on paper, with the effect size of negative 0.15 overall and negative 0.29 for expository texts. As we said before, there's no spatial anchoring to support memory formation. A concept has to live somewhere, and on paper, we know exactly where that is. Typed notes avoid brain condensing information down, which means shallow transcriptions, and we know this. So psychologists have basically been able to determine now that if you are typing when you're taking notes in class, and you can basically get to the point where your typing can be to the same speed as a person who is talking. It's the equivalent of bringing in a tape recorder, pressing record, and walking away. Your brain literally is not contending anymore with that information, but when you're doing notes by handwriting, specifically cursive, because you can write a lot faster with cursive, you can't write as fast as a person is speaking. So you are forced to contend with what they're saying, with their ideas. You condense the main thoughts, you contend with what they said in order to be able to say it more succinctly. It's your brain is actually active. Now, it would be great if you could do that while you're recording it, and then you can go back and you have the whole transcript, but typing is not the same as interacting when you're writing by hand what a person is saying. And then did I hit all the other ones? Did you have anything else you wanted to say about it?
No, I think you got it.
Okay, we're good. All right, so this next slide is actually near and dear to my heart because this is where I really do want to highlight the participation that admin and teachers have with us. So this slide didn't come our way through anything that was Joe's genius or mine. It was actually a teacher professional who came to Dr. Hughes and let her know that, you know, they're seeing things just in math and how screens are becoming a problem and how children really don't have the reading skills to be able to break down math and don't have math comprehension to be able to, like with word problems, they don't even understand what question is being asked because they don't have the reading comprehension to know with the word problems what is being asked of them. And so this slide actually came from a slide deck that Dr. Hughes had provided to us from, I guess it was a teacher professional day that she had. And so this is the literal white brain matter that scientists are seeing is compromised in young students due to exposure to screens. Now, they say excessive use of screens, but what does that mean? More than 2 hours a day. So you got to read the fine line, right? Excessive use of screens is 2 hours a day. I can't point to a family in this district that isn't struggling with that number, right? We're all there together. And I guess what I would like to show is that during COVID, we pivoted in real time a completely different way to teach children. Why? Out of fear that students might be harmed by something, by the COVID virus, right? All right, so that's what we did for the perception of what could be hurting our children. They're literally being compromised right now. This is not something that we think might happen. It's happening. It's documented. And what does this brain matter even mean? Early elementary children's brains were examined and found to have lower structural integrity of white matter in the brain, thought now to be linked to excessive screen use. The brain's white matter, which is myelin, is insulation for neural connectivity responsible for supporting language and executive function. And remember, white brain matter is compromised by any type of screen use, educational otherwise. It doesn't matter whether you're playing Candy Crush or you're learning on an ed tech app. It's being compromised, and we don't know, especially for the younger years, whether or not they'll ever be able to remake this brain matter. We don't know. We're at the beginning of this sort of thing. So the next slide also comes from that same teacher, and it's But it keeps kids so calm, right? They're able to interact, they're able to be exposed, they're excited. And I guess one of the things that I would ask you is that when a child is quiet, it's quite possible, and this slide shows this, that they're just being overwhelmed. The sheer amount of information that comes their way on an educational platform or app, you can't possibly process it. I mean, Joe could tell you a little bit more about how just the constant colors that are changing, the screen time that's constantly moving. Cartoons aren't even the same as when we were kids. The per spec, ratio of things coming your way. Things are forever changing, and your eyes are seeing all that and trying to keep up. And so, do we call it swimming and learning to swim when a child is in a swimming pool drowning but they're quiet? No, we don't call that learning to swim. We call that drowning.
So next up, I wanted to talk about the cost of distractions. And we did a survey 2023, where 2/3 of students report being distracted by their own devices, and more than half of them distracted by their peers' devices. 70% of teachers, according to Education Next, say school-issued devices distract them, their students from work. Now, when brain is distracted, when a student's brain is distracted, it switches from a goal-oriented attention to stimulus-driven response. And each and every distraction can basically, every adult here knows what happens if you're focused on something and something interrupts you. If you, like this, no. Basically, it's a full stop, and it takes you a period of time to get back on track. Students, up to 23 minutes for them to get back into the same mental state they were if there is an interruption, a distraction, whether it's from their phone, whether it's something with the school-issued device or something that just happens in the environment. A disruptive student can cause this. The effects of it, what a student has to do is they basically have to reload all of the models they had in their brain while they were working on that math problem. They need to re-engage their executive functions. It affects different ages differently. Younger kids will not have as much ability to recover as quickly. Now, what are distractions? Well, let's talk about phones. Now, everybody in here has a phone, I assume. You have yours, right? I do. Okay. So these are two screenshots from high schoolers in our district. And I asked them the other day to show me their pickups. Now, what is a pickup? A pickup is when you interact with your phone, you unlock it, and you basically separate from whatever you're doing to interact with that device. And as you can see, these are good students. They're getting good grades. But we've got 24 and 37 pickups during the school day. This is a low use day for them. As you can see, this was the low point of the week. I don't know, Wednesday must have been boring. So, distractions matter. Now, we do have one more. I'm going to let Senator Hickenlooper talk, the senator from Colorado.
And I'll ask any one of you.
But he's got a great question.
Who answers. If we're going to really build the problem solving and technical skills required for jobs in the future, how can parents and educators encourage the active over the passive style of learning?
By eliminating K-12 one-to-one connected devices. Because none of the people who were successful in those skills as adults had those as children. And so if we want our children to be set up for success in the future, we actually need to give them a childhood filled with analog skills first. And I bet Jared has a thought on that.
Technology is a tool for experts to offload their skills. I know how to do stats. I don't feel like doing it. This tool helps me do it. They are not tools for novices to learn how to become experts. When they offload before learning the initial process, they have no clue, and now they're at the whim of whatever the machine tells them. And so I think one of my favorite statistics is the only time we've measured digital literacy. It's called the ICILS. It's the only international test on this. 2013, 2018, 2023. Between those years, the percentage of kids who are digitally literate has dropped 22%. Yet the amount of money we have spent has increased by $6 billion, and the percentage of kids who spend time every day on a computer at school has gone up 550%. So clearly, the secret to learning how to use tech is to not use tech. It's to learn analog, learn how we normally learn, and then use tech once you already know how to think to make that thinking easier. So that's what we're kind of seeing.
I appreciate this. I could spend an hour having that discussion. And I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
So, Dr. Hovarth referenced the ICILS digital literacy. I did find that chart. This details 2018 to 2023. You can see far left, we have the international average. Went from 496, or you can see, it went down. But in the US, it went down even further. International computational thinking scores internationally went down. The US, a much more drastic decrease. And this is from us integrating more and more digital technology. We're doing more digital literacy teaching. It's having the opposite effect.
So educational objectives. To be clear, we're not anti-tech. In fact, we want to have more tech in the places that it matters. But we want to reclaim education as deeply meaningful and a human endeavor. We want to form human beings who are oriented towards what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. Classical education, and like Dr. Horvath said, analog learning. We want higher rigor education. And part of that is teacher empathy. That's something that screens can never give us. We have to have a teacher on the other side reading our facial expressions to know we're not getting something, to be able to adapt in real time, not because we got an answer wrong on some kind of app, but because they can see that we're struggling. That's what we need for our students. A couple of quotes from Dr. Horvath. Screens are brilliant for speed, but they strip away the friction that makes learning truly stick. As educators, sometimes we don't like that friction. It's hard to see. That's where the empathy comes in again. We don't want struggling students, and yet sometimes the struggle is the very thing that helps with learning. Another quote, effort isn't the enemy of learning, it's the secret ingredient. And then one other thing I'd like you to consider is that ed tech is not helping and assisting pedagogy, it is pedagogy.
Okay. Also in the Senate testimony, they did ask, excuse me, who's getting it right?
In this realm of educational technology, is there any country or region that's getting it right that we should be looking to do?
Surprise, surprise, Scandinavian countries. Sweden has banned most ed tech for primary years and almost all ed tech for secondary as well. They started bringing it in high school years. Norway just followed suit, and Finland is now, I've given them about 2 months, they're gonna go on the way. They just looked at the data and they said, this ain't working, let's go back to learning. Whereas the rest of us look at data and say, how can we make it work better? Man, I could ask you, how do I make anthrax better? Maybe the answer is you don't. You go back to not using it.
So, all of this conversation was about getting to this point where we talk about kind of a picture of what a reform would look like to get us back on track, to get our students back to where they need to go with an analog, full education, to sort of reverse some of the trends that we're seeing both nationally and even in our own PSSA data and everywhere else. So, top level, computer labs, K through 8. Block scheduling for our upper grades. Cell phones, turn them off bell to bell, and be strict about it. Actual differentiated math and reading in our elementary schools, doing active, intentional technology instruction, bringing back more novels and textbooks into our classrooms, and again, focusing more on handwriting and cursive, which I'm I was very happy to hear what we're already doing in that area. So first up, computer labs. This was the norm before COVID, especially in elementary. I think my recommendation would be for elementary and middle school, we do computer labs so that we can control how tech is actually being used in instruction. Kids shouldn't really need to be interacting with technology until third grade. They don't need to know how to search, do research on a laptop at that age. Again, what our focus would be during that time is structured typing, computer skills. One of the concerns that we did hear from our teachers is availability of devices for testing and other class activities. This would solve that. Not just one computer lab, obviously we would need several to be able to facilitate the number of students we have in the different grades. Now, the recommendation we want to start with is no more than 45 minutes a day for elementary, 60 minutes for a day, middle school, for screen time. That starts to cut back and get us closer to what a reasonable norm should be when we share screen time responsibilities with parents. Okay. Next thing is block schedule. Most of our neighboring districts already use a block schedule, A/B days, 4 classes a day. Right now we have 7 transitions a day. That's a lot of time lost just moving from this class to that class. A block schedule would allow us to really use more of our in-classroom time to focus on subject, provide better experience for the students to get support from the teachers. Teachers would be able to actually dig deeper into a subject than they currently can with our 40-minute-ish periods. Plus, it also gives us some options as far as when you get your homework done. You can do it that night or you can do it the next night because your class will meet every other day.
All right, no cell phones, and this is obviously a negotiation we would have to have with the district, with the board. We know that there is a bill coming our way that might force our hand, but in full disclosure, I think that we probably as a district already meet that criteria because what does bell to bell even really mean, right? There's some gray area there. So devices turned off upon arrival for the duration of the school day. I think that would ease parents' minds who want to have cell phones on their high schoolers for emergency purposes, but by turning it off, you don't have to deal with the notification and the pickup stuff that Joe was talking about. Devices cannot be brought into the elementary schools at all, obviously medical exceptions, and no halfway measures.
Differentiated reading and math. This is the middle ground wording I've kind of came upon for this presentation. Some of the other ideas are walk to math, walk to read. Basically, in elementary school, right now we have third graders who we try to give reading instruction to, and there's a wide range of ability in that third grade. You've got some that are, need support that they would be better suited in the second grade. You've got some that are ready to tackle fifth grade novels. Now, instead of doing just reading and math by grade level, we would then do it by ability level so that, okay, we have our reading blocks together, math blocks together, then students would gather based on their ability, not just whatever age they are at. This would actually allow us to do true differentiated learning that would allow our advanced students to continue to achieve and our struggling students to receive the support that they desperately need. And always, students can move between the levels as skills improve. The end goal is everybody's in a really good place. Technology instruction. Obviously, we have typing as a teachable skill. This is something we talked about with Type C, and I'm really interested to see where that goes. We should be graduating students who are capable of 180 to 100 words per minute. That will give them a good advantage in no matter what career they want to go into. I personally believe Chromebooks are subpar devices. They hinder what our students actually end up thinking a computer can do. I've seen this with my own children. You know, there's no curiosity. I can't compile software, install this program, plug these other things into it, figure out new and different ways to use it. Chromebooks are very passive devices, and that's a personal thing for me. One thing that we may want to consider is, you know, as we are collaborating with parents on screen time, sharing the amount of time that their student has spent on screens inside the buildings, on the report cards. That would be a collaborative effort with them.
All right, let's talk books. We want real physical books. We want in-depth reading of full novels, the goal for comprehension, and we want homework assignments to read, not just reading in class. We want to bring in more books. We want to bring in old books. We want books, books, books. We want Huxley, who said, "People will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacity to think." Brave New World. We want Ray Bradbury and more of him, Fahrenheit 451. There must be something in books, things we can't even imagine, to make a woman stay in a burning house. And we want to have conversations and robust debate over Orwell and whether he got it right or Huxley. Orwell fearing book bans and Huxley fearing a world where no one even likes to read and there's no books to ban. Next slide. Handwriting. Dr. Hughes had talked about this, the connection of the brain and the hand and how learning is even made, the psychology behind it. We want printing up until a certain point and then learning cursive, and we want cursive in high school too. We want to actually physically grade penmanship, back to handwriting and getting a grade for that. We want to grade grammar, we want to grade spelling, we want to grade punctuation, and we would like Cornell note-taking to be taught in class. And this is one of the things, the science behind how we learn and why we learn. Spell check, I even know as an adult, if you have a word that for whatever reason it just doesn't stick and you don't know how to spell it, spell check keeps reminding you that you don't know how to spell it, but spell check doesn't teach you how to spell it. And so we would like to have actual physical rough drafts, even in high school sometimes, where you have to write everything out so that you can see the word that you don't know how to spell, and then you have to go and look up the word and then spell it concretely instead of just clicking a button and having the computer do it for you. Transformative learning that's not just interactive, not just exposure, but actually takes the time to correct your mistake. Teacher circling a thing but not telling you how to spell it. We want that back. It's also important to note that we knew this in our generation. You didn't begin to write as E.E. Cummings. You had to learn the rules before you broke them.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
We're not going to get away that quickly. We're going to have closing remarks, Joe, because
Okay.
I love English literature.
Okay.
So I'm going to steal another Dr. Horvath quote in closing. One of the main selling points of digital technology is that it makes tasks easier. Typing is less strenuous than handwriting. Following GPS commands is less demanding than reading a map. Spell check requires less effort than writing your own prose. In the professional world, this efficiency is an undeniable boon. But in the classroom, it's the technology's Achilles heel. And then in closing, finally, I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis. We all want progress, but progress means getting nearer to the place where you want to be. And if you've taken a wrong turn, then to go forward does not get you any nearer. If you're on the wrong road, progress means doing an about turn and walking back to the right road. In that case, the man who turns back the soonest is the most progressive. Okay?
That's all I had.
Yes.
Any discussion?
Would you guys like to sit while we
I would
discuss?
love that.
I
Thank
would
you
like to
so much.
sit,
And I will
yes.
say, I have new respect for Dr. Hughes and
Yeah.
Dr. Root. Presentations are hard, man. Good job.
I'll start while you're walking back. Thank you for that great presentation. I've not read the books that you recommended. I have studied the brain a fair bit, and we didn't talk a ton about behavior, but I'm just curious in some of your research. So I've come to understand that the prefrontal cortex is the brain's CEO. It executive function, impulse control, moral judgment, things like that. In addiction, whether it be screen addiction, drug addiction, the brain's flooded with dopamine, limbic hijack happens and overrides that executive functioning. So did you see any studies on what has happened to student behavior with the advent of all of this ed tech?
Yeah, so we touched on it briefly. Some of it is being pacified, and that we put in the pro column, right? But that's just being overwhelmed and drowning. But, and we see this in early education. I mean, it's our kindergartners and our first graders that are struggling. They come to us struggling, and the hypothesis is that it's screen device addiction. You try to take away an iPad from a kindergartner, everybody knows what happens.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, behavioral issues are a problem. And it's the definition of insanity to continue to give them more screen time to pacify. It just goes round and round.
It always makes me sad when I'm in a restaurant and I see people who put an iPad in front of the kid, and that's the only way they can get them to behave, in the restaurant.
I think on that note, one of the things that I really see as potentially contributing to behavioral issues is that people tend to behave worse when they don't have a solid sense of the reason, the purpose for which they're in a place. They're distracted, and so they act out. They don't have a strong focus on the purpose for which they're there. And so one of the things that really stood out to me, I did read the Digital Delusion book, and one of the things that was brought up, and I think this is undeniable because we've all experienced this, is that when you have a cell phone ban that is only for the duration of class, where, okay, class is over, you can pull it out, check it. Also, you got smartwatches on. So the smartwatch, you can be distracted during class. You get a notification, you can check it really quickly, probably without anyone seeing. But even if you don't check it, you know it happened. Feel the buzz. Okay? Well, even if you don't have those, even if we say smartwatches have to be put away, if a student is allowed to go to the locker between classes, and especially with 45-minute classes, if they go to the locker between classes and get their phone, they never actually, so what happens is, when the phone goes away, they're thinking about the phone. They're thinking, what am I missing? What am I missing? That can last for easily, that withdrawal can last for 20, 30, 45 minutes. That could last an entire class period, where even though they don't have the phone, and maybe it's far enough away that they can't get notifications from it, it can still actually produce a distraction because the addiction to notifications and finding out what's going on now, is constantly taking them out of the school day, even when they don't have their own phone with them.
21 days to break a habit. So, and I'm just going to go off of your cell phone. So, private schools have lock bags. Phone has to be turned off. That phone goes in that lock bag for that class period. You can check it at lunchtime. You can check it at your break time, because the way their classes are, they have a 15-minute break, morning and afternoon, and they have a lunch break, 25-minute lunch break. That is when they can go have someone, one of the teachers, unlock that heavy-duty magnetic bag, but that goes in the bag. The phone has to be off in the bag, and then they can check it during those times. Is that something that anyone has checked into?
There were potentially
Miss
going to be.
Mary Lee Hall
Yeah,
absolutely
there were going to be
has.
grants potentially for,
Yeah, we worked.
I mean, that is a solution, because, and I have one more question for you, in all your research. The reason being is when COVID happened, when you have children, learners, school children, high school, middle school, elementary school, kindergarten, and they have associated, whether it be learning, let's just call them, I hate to call them disabilities, but different learning aspects. When you have neurodivergent versus neurotypical, when you have ADHD children, when you have children, because let's face it, there's more of that in our society today than there was back when we were in school. We learned to deal with different things. But you, in those cases, a lot of those issues, you have more addictive personality. So, and I went through this with my own child. When COVID hit, and she was tied to that computer all day long, I could not, it was HE double toothpicks at our house in the evening, trying to get that away from her. The fact that she had a cell phone. I ended up cutting ties with anything electronic with my teenager. Try doing that with any teenagers and look at the fight you get. It took me, probably with her because of being on the spectrum and the other issues that she has, it took me, it was 30 days to get her to be completely electronic free. And because of that, what was their research on how to incorporate that? Because really you do. It is very difficult when you have those neurodivergence along with other issues. Once they get that in their hand, I've had to cut it again, and she's a senior, and I had to cut all electronics now because I let her have a cell phone. It has parameters on it. I check it every day. I check her, if she's utilizing a computer at school, it's checked every day. I get a report from her teachers in the classes that she has to utilize that for some of her senior projects. But I have found that here I am again, and it's only been a month that she started using it, and here I am again having issues because it's all of a sudden, it's there. And it's that immediate gratification. Did they address that in any research with that and how, because we have to remember, we have more students now than ever in the school system that deal with that.
So the book didn't address special education just as a subject matter, but it did talk about how for anyone, any parent of any child, special education or no, that's trying to cut back on screen time, that the education in a classroom that would undo what a parent is trying to do at home, that's something to consider, that it does compromise what's being taught at home. But then there also is research, you're exactly right, that's outside of the book that talks about the addictive nature of special education. And then it also gets into just anyone who has deficiencies in attention. Ed tech will continue to frustrate that. And, our district is not any more special than any other district. It's the transition periods between classrooms, between even within a classroom where behavioral problems happen. But there's that tension where learning happens when the noise shuts off and you can actually start to digest.
So you had talked about block schedules as well. I can tell you just from my own experience with my own child and the different things that I've done. I mean, like I said, I had to cut technology completely off. Took 30 days to get her, and then no sooner does it get introduced back to her, it's that immediate gratification. There is something to be said for our neurodivergent population that's out there. Block schedules. One thing she hates is she hates having, I'm just going to go off of that too because you mentioned that. No sooner does she get settled into a class, it takes her, you have 45 minutes of class time. Out of that 45 minutes, you have your intro and getting settled in, and then you have your, let's end this, let's wrap it up and do this. By the time she gets to the end of the class, she doesn't even remember what happened because it's everything just so quick, 7-8 classes a day, the constant transition from one to another. She would, and I can tell you this just coming from her, she would rather have a longer class period, do a block schedule, 4 classes each semester, and because that way she can settle in, and I have seen it when I homeschooled her, she learns the subject matter so much better.
And,
So-
and, go ahead.
No, I just have some ideas and thoughts, but are you finished?
Yeah,
I
no,
don't wanna
I'm
interrupt.
just, I was, yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, I just want to thank you both for all of the research and information. It is all fascinating, and this is new, right? We're coming along the tail end of kids coming through technology through their K through 12 years. But I do want to just note a couple of things, and that is that the Pennsylvania Department of Education, they emphasize digital literacy, right? And the use of technology in a safe way with responsibility. And I am not seeing evidence of Southern York County School District administrators or staff abusing that, but actually moving towards safe and responsible use of technology in an effort to turn out responsible citizens that are literate in this world of digital technology. And also, I know you were referring to, Senate Bill 1014 that is kind of sitting in the House waiting right now when it comes to band-to-band cell phones, or bell-to-bell cell phone banning. We also have a policy in place, as you well know, that the feedback that we're receiving from administration and staff is that this is being handled very well and that our children are being successful. And I have to say, with 2 kids that have gone through K through 12 almost, got one graduating here, they have both been educated so well within this district. Bill and I couldn't be more proud of the teachers and the challenges that our children have had. And I certainly can see a lot of information that's being shared in your presentation that could be looked at by administration and staff. But I also understand that our legislators and this position that we've been elected to is meant to be tasked with establishing policy, providing fiscal oversight, hiring and evaluating our superintendent, and advocating for public education. And I really think we are getting way out of that 10,000 feet view, and we are way down in the weeds. I'm not hearing encouragement of teachers that are doing a lot of these things that are listed here that there may be no knowledge of because there aren't kids in the district that you may have. And that's not a personal attack. That is this is not our experience as having 2 children that have gone through K through 12 in this district. And I think we need to be really careful because we don't have the authority as board members to enforce any of this. We need to be good listeners to our administration and vice versa, right? They're listening to us. Policies are being changed. They're working very hard to provide information. But also understanding that what does this mean for all the teachers at a breakneck speed? This is coming off. This is what we're doing. This is what we want. That is not speaking for the entire board. That is speaking for 1 or 2 members of the board. And our strength is in our collective, not in our individual. And as a board member, I can appreciate every bit of value that each one of us brings. And there's some massive intelligence here and some great research and things that we don't know everything about. But we also can't get the cart before the horse. And we also can't make legislation without Harrisburg. And we also need to keep in mind our task that is given to us by Harrisburg of establishing policies. That's what we do. Provide fiscal oversight. That's what we do. Hiring and evaluate our superintendent. That's what we do. And advocate for public education. We cannot require teachers to do anything. We cannot tell our administration, you must. We are not the educators, and this is not what we are tasked to do. Can we collaborate back and forth and ask questions and be concerned about things, especially in an environment like this? I think absolutely. But I don't think that we are in a position of authority to tell what we want done and expect it. I think that's really getting in a place where we don't belong.
I mean,
Well, here's
Mary
my
Lee, I'd actually
perspective
like
on
to
that,
address
real,
that as education chair. I think, and perhaps I'm wrong,
yeah.
I think that perhaps you might have misunderstood the nature of the presentation. Again, perhaps I'm wrong in all humility. We were just presenting research. What we do with it is up to us collectively as a board. We were presenting possibilities. What we do with those possibilities are up to us as a board. And
Okay.
the only thing that we would be recommending would be policy related. 'Cause
I understand.
We do policy, and that would be something that we would all talk about together and choose to do a direction.
Okay.
And so.
I just heard a lot of "we want,"
Yeah, 'cause-
and this
Yes.
is what we want.
Well, I took that
and
as
that's
the
not
presenters.
necessarily.
I took that as the presenter
Yeah,
saying.
that was the
Noted.
presentation, it wasn't us stating that as
I'm not
the
attacking.
board. All right.
I love all
and-
of you. I'm just, hey,
And-
let's just bring it to a nice level
Sure.
here.
And my perspective on it is, these kinds of reforms are advocating for public education. Block schedule, all of our neighbors are doing it now. That
I'm
is
not hearing
advocating.
Does our administration want this? Does the school district want this? Does this work within our school district? Who have we talked to that brings this to fruition in a way that we can look at? I mean, but all in all, does this fall within our responsibilities?
I think it does.
We have like 4 mega responsibilities there, and telling staff and administration how to teach is not one of them.
So we have a comprehensive plan that's going to be coming up.
Sure.
There's going to be a steering committee. That's something that the board is going to have to vote on, that comprehensive plan. So
Do we
I
have
see it as absolutely our responsibility to engage with the direction our district takes on broad initiatives like how are we going to use
Okay,
technology?
but not
What is our
demand
educational
and
philosophy?
require
Oh.
what they do.
There's a
in
certain
their
amount of that.
teaching.
Well, there's a certain amount of that with policy.
I think the difference here is my experience in public education and understanding what our job is on the board and what maybe another understanding is. I don't know that we're going to be able to meet in the middle with what that is, because I think telling how to teach when we are not teachers and this is not a part of our job is the way to do it. And we're already at pre-COVID levels with our Chromebooks. And what else would we use? I'm trying to find the end line here, right? If we're not using Chromebooks, what else? And if we're already at pre-COVID levels, then what is the ask? Is it just getting rid of a certain grade level and going to block schedules? I mean, it's all a lot packed into just a presentation. That's not just a presentation. That is, this is coming, prepare yourself. And that's not a message that I want to send to anyone in our district. and
No,
that's
it's
not my
more,
job.
it's more danger that we see that's going to continue to build. And by no means do I think that it's appropriate on any level to think that we're going to, as a district, do a 180. But these are known dangers. And so cooperation with admin, cooperation with teachers, cooperation with students, we need to start talking about it. Because if we're going to make any changes, we have to know in advance what direction we would like to aim for to be able to then see years coming for our comprehensive plan. How do we adapt that? This is not a fear-mongering conversation, but it is real harm that's being done to our students. And I trust that our teachers are smart enough and already see, I mean, part of that presentation was given to us, Mrs. Hall, from a teacher in our district, talking about the white brain matter that is not going to be able to be recouped by younger children. That came from a teacher in our district.
I understand.
And so
I'm not
don't you think
negating
that
your
our
research.
teachers would want to be able to adapt in real time
I-
over
I-
years to try to get us
Doesn't
back
this
on the
need to
right
go
track?
through the correct channels? The staff, to the administration, to us, when we need to approve fiscally, when we need to develop policy? Isn't
So-
that how it should come?
Well, I mean, well, there's two directions that an initiative can go. It's either from the bottom up, which is what you just described, the teachers to the
But they are
administration to
there,
the board.
right? They are in
And
it.
then
We are
there's
not.
also, right, sure. And you also have, if you are in education every day, do you see what's going on at a higher level where people who are not engaged in education every single day see a different perspective that we can share with them, collaborate together, and come up with a hybrid approach that meets everybody's needs.
But shouldn't that not come from administration to us?
So,
I-
so it could.
We are just having a difference of
Sure.
opinion, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Well,
You
yeah,
don't
so-
have to convince each other.
Yep.
We do
No, no.
have another meeting coming
Yes.
up for finance and
Yeah.
budget, so I don't want to keep it into
It's
a 20 minute.
multifaceted, because, the presentation, really, both presentations had a significant portion of screens and their effects in them. And those screens are multifaceted, because you have the screen time of our students in their home, which we have zero
Control.
jurisdiction over. So that's completely out of our hands. We have the screen usage of personal devices in our school. Now, that we have policy purview over. You want to speak from perspective of the board's responsibility, and that is absolutely a policy realm decision. However, I do think we're a little bit maybe more blessed than some school districts, because cell service in our school is so bad.
It's a good
I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? It's really terrible. So, I think we have had some of our own board members see, a lot of positive student interaction in social times like lunch and things of that nature, which is probably due to the fact that some of our cell phone coverage is so poor here at the school. So that's a little bit of a feather in our cap that we don't have. So lastly, then, that screen time and its impact on education. I think it would be impossible for anyone to argue that there was a very, very large learning loss that occurred over the COVID period. And in that, what was the missing component? It was the teacher.
Face-to-face.
And even though the teacher was there doing their absolute best to try and use the screen to help the education process, the teacher missing from that component created a lot of learning loss.
And that's the empathy of the teacher that was in the presentation. That's where we want more teachers. We want more teaching. We want more face-to-face. Exactly.
No, I can agree that we certainly have all the purview to try and understand the data and how the screens and COVID, because I think it would be really tough to blame it all on screen time, because there's a significant turn that happens when COVID happened. And that's going to have a lingering effect, especially with the youngest in that, as they come up through. There's a lot for our very hardworking teachers to make up for in that process. But I do think we should be cautious in that we are really listening to our administration and our teachers in not having a knee-jerk reaction, or to have a reaction of unintended consequences. So I think that we need to be very methodical and very conscientious in listening before we would create any sort of policy that would have, lasting effect. Obviously, the comprehensive plan is coming, and there's going to be, as Dr. Ruppert referenced earlier, and there's going to be a lot of work in that. But it does appear to me already that our administration with Dr. Brayson at the helm is trying to find a good balance, or a better balance, as far as screens and our students are concerned. And I think they have some good internal data that backs some of that up. What is the national trends? They're real, they exist, and we are somewhat following them. I think all of our county has really followed those, but I would say that Susquehannock has been able to stay at the top. Even though the whole scale has slid down, it has. The data doesn't lie, it has. Susquehannock has been able to stay at the top of that. So, are we happy with that? Of course not. You know, we don't want to see that sliding trend in education. None of us do see that sliding trend. And we need to do everything we can, at least for our, piece of the puzzle, to fight that sliding trend. But I think it also is good to acknowledge the fact that what we have been doing has been at least bucking the trend better than most.
Agreed. And we have been ahead of the curve, and part of that is due to admin pivoting sometimes with, seemingly crazy ideas that 2 weeks later legislation catches up with and mandates that. We've already done that with the handwriting and cursive. I mean, we were ahead of the game with that. And then our AI policy, Dr. Bryson, was it you or was it Dr. Hughes? I forget who said that, talking to other districts, it might have been Dr. Hughes, that they just put in the PSBA one and then later had to adapt other things because of the very questions that we were asking and implementing in real time in our policy. But that's only because our district is so great. That's only because our teachers give us feedback. Our admin adapts in real time. And I do want to go ahead and just give us some props too, that we are a questioning board that stays on top of things, that cares about children, that listens to research and tries to implement the things that we learn. And education does get it wrong sometimes. And that's not unique to our district. I think what's unique to our district is to be able to adapt in real time when we find that out. Whole word reading was something that took over the nation, every classroom. Well, our district was one of the first to go back to phonics because whole word reading is hot garbage. It was a terrible thing that education got wrong.
If I could, I think, support much of which all of you said, to be quite honest. It's not whole reading and it's not phonics. And we've learned a lot of it the hard way. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to compare the device. It's not no devices or all devices. And what we do in education is pendulum back and forth and forget history. Mm-hmm. And we rarely end somewhere in the middle where we're using devices well and monitoring what that is doing, right? We learned quickly by going to phonics that we were missing
pieces.
Whole language, or the concept of the science of reading, which is a combination. In mathematics, it's not drill and kill, and it's not entirely conceptual understanding. There's a place for both. The key for success is when are you doing each of those and how often? And that's a balance that I think we're becoming focused on. And as I say that, this technology piece is another one of those. I do not believe it's all or nothing. I believe there is a happy medium.
Agreed.
And I want people to hear that because it creates anxiety. I bet you, if I asked Dr. Reppert or Dr. Hughes right now, and I said, how did that presentation make you feel? And I would imagine there was some anxiety. There was some, oh my Lord, where are we headed and how quickly? And because what we know is some of the things on the pillars of reform are years of a shift. It's not a day, it's not a week, it's not months, it's years. And that, such as the block schedule, I can tell you from experience, is about a 3-year process if you want it to last. If you don't care whether it lasts after 3 years, do it in a year, but it'll be gone in 2 years. Okay? And the reason is, it's an organization that we've created, right, wrong, or indifferent, that we're telling our staff, you're gonna be a part of the process. We're gonna get your feedback. You're gonna be able to sit in on our comprehensive plan if you so choose and have that discussion and share what that means. And that's what creates this long-term sustainability. So I think that ties into everything.
It does.
And it's not even necessarily that, I could see both from what Mary Lee had shared, like, is this our list of where we're headed? Because if it is, I'm signing off now. There's no way we're making that all happen like that. The cell phone thing, that's low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I'll be completely honest, that's a policy change. We move forward. It's probably not a bag because
Yeah, that's,
the kids have their own devices to unlock the bag, and I just carry another cell phone.
Yep.
And I have a watch in my pocket. The bottom line comes to, you set a policy and you have progressive discipline. The kid has their cell phone out. It's a detention, and then it's this, and then similar to what we do with most everything we do from a distance.
I wouldn't imagine you'd be able to do a bag on a large scale.
No, it's expensive and we don't have the
Yep.
money. So.
Grant funding for that has long since passed.
Yeah, right.
I think that was a happy marriage of what we were trying to say, and absolutely, I mean, this might surprise people, but when I said that it's not anti-tech, it's not, because I actually want way more tech in the places that it matters. So it's to be thoughtful in places where it might not make as much sense, but then way tech-heavy in the places that it matters. So no, by no means anti-tech.
I'd really like to just quickly piggyback on something that you said, Dr. Bryson, because it is really something that's extremely important to me as a board member. And that is that, and I hope, especially in this setting, that we have a lot of teachers who are either watching or going to watch. Because I really, really care what they think. Now, I do and have expressed many times that it is very difficult for me to understand what that is. I have had conversations with teachers and retired teachers and had people come up to me in public who I don't even know and start talking to me. So, but that's anecdotal, you know, and although it's not that it has no value, it's anecdotal. And I know that we have been working a long time as a board about having a way for our teachers to communicate with us that keeps us at the 50,000-foot level, because I do think that's important. And I know that we are going forward and working with Mr. Templeton on a teacher survey that I really hope that, good, bad, or indifferent, I would like to hear it all. You know, I'm not the kind of person who likes to have a conversation with someone who's going to agree with me. The conversations I always remember are the conversations with someone who doesn't agree with me. Because in that, you can get a light into what they are thinking and what you are not thinking. So I am hopeful that our teachers, especially if you're listening, please, this is not just an exercise. It is something that I'm really hopeful can become part of our culture so that we as a board can better represent our students, our administration, our teachers as a whole from the 50,000-foot view. Because at the end of the day, the decisions that we make really matter. And the more information that we have, and not necessarily anecdotal or specific or I know who said this, but the 50,000-foot view of what that information is and how it is affecting our students only helps us to be able to make better decisions. You know, and in that, and I really hope and desire to respect the chain of command in all of that. That information can truly be insulated away by a third party so that the only thing that we're really seeing is trying to have an understanding of how the overarching thoughts of our teacher are affecting the education of our students. So, thank you.
I have a couple of things. One is when it comes to how change is initiated. Joe brought up that there's bottom down and there's bottom up and there's top down, and ultimately it's got to be both. And the reason, so at work, I do not use whatever tools I want to use. I use tools that have been approved by the organization, because everyone using whatever tools they want would be chaos. So I use the tools that are at hand, and those tools were already there when I came in. And are those always the tools that I would most prefer to use? No. And so sometimes the tools are actually a problem. And so I'll try to escalate that and bring that up to higher parts of the organization. But I try to be very flexible about, here's the problem I'm having. There are a lot of ways you could solve this, and I understand you have a lot of constraints on what solutions you can bring from an organizational perspective, but here's the problem I'm having. And so it's got to be a negotiation where it goes bottom up, comes top down, and it goes back and forth. I also think that what I see this presentation as really valuable in doing is challenging thinking about these tools, because a lot of times I don't even, like most days, I use the tools I use, and I don't actually even think about whether they're the ideal tools for the job, because I'm busy doing the job. And that's the life of an individual contributor. I manage a small team, but most of my work is still individual contributor work. And that is what an individual, I don't spend much time thinking about, oh, I really wish I was using this tool. It's no, here's the tool, here are the tools I'm using, here's the problem I'm solving, how do I do that? And so it is the job of people that are higher up in the organization to consider, what tools would make my job easier. But when it comes to challenging thinking, I wanted to kind of marry two things from the presentations together. So I'm going to challenge Dr. Bryson and his thinking. So I was looking at the geometry tools that you were talking about, and the tool that we have to allow you to have a triangle presented on screen. And you can pull the vertices of the triangle around, and it updates continuously the degree measures of the triangle. And so that you can see, okay, as I extend this angle, the other two angles get narrower, and so forth. And you were saying, it would be a lot more work. I think you said you can't do that without a screen, or you said it would be a lot more work without a screen. And immediately I was thinking, well, how would I do that without a screen? Maybe I would have like a magnetic board, 3 magnets, string going around the magnets. And that got me thinking, I would find it a lot more memorable, the exercise with the magnets and the string, than I would the exercise on the screen. And the reason is that we often hear that some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, and some people are kinesthetic learners, and that's false. Everybody is all the kinds of learner. You might be a little bit more this one or a little bit more that one, but you learn best when you actually engage all of those in what you're doing. So the process of actually moving the magnet and then sitting there and taking the protractor, and the fact that slows things down is not a bug. It's actually a feature, because learning takes time, and it takes time to absorb concepts that you experience. I mean, one of the things I love about Fahrenheit 451 is the comparison of screens to reading. And to me, audiobooks actually go over in the screens category, because what's the problem with screens and audiobooks compared to a book in my hands? And actually, books on screens, they're not as bad, but they're still in that direction. And here's why. When I read a book, it helps me to develop my own thinking. I do not just receive the thinking that's coming at me from the screen. No, I read, and then I read something, and I think, I have a thought about that. And I put my finger on the page to hold my place while I have my thought about what I just read. And I develop my own thinking about how would I say that? Or what is that producing in me? I have an additional thought that builds on that thought. And that happens when I read a physical book. And so I think challenging that, it isn't necessarily the same to have an audiobook playing for you, or to have even the text on the screen, because you lose those things. I think we need to challenge that thinking, because it's easy to think it's the same. And it's easy to think that without even really thinking about it. So I do think that it's it's worth having those conversations and worth presenting those challenges to those individual contributors who don't necessarily have time to think through that on an everyday basis because they're just using the tools that they have. They receive the book digitally. They're not typically going to say, can I please have, physical hard copies of this book? That's usually not something they're going to do,
Right.
even if it would be better.
I can see that. However, just applying, right, my experiences are too. They've been reading books all throughout going through their school experience. They're not listening to stuff on their Chromebook. Maybe that's a parental authority, making sure that that's not happening, but it didn't even hit me in the head that my child would even consider that. Because I know that he's accountable to his teacher. I know that they were going through that book every day, reading that book, opening the page. It's not in their computer. So that's just the experience that I have, that's not something that is being advocated for by teachers to listen to the book on your Chromebook. They're reading books. So I appreciate what you're sharing there. I'm not certain that applies as a whole to Southern York County School District.
Well, I think we're probably a lot better than most in that we're already not as, we haven't gone as far down the path as a lot of school districts in the wrong direction. And I think we've been making slower progress in the wrong direction. I think there are probably still some things we've been getting wrong with tech. Dr. Bryson alluded to that it's hard to find the right balance. But I think that that's all the more reason to make sure we get ahead of it and say, okay, we're not gonna go down that road. We do recognize that these things have value. So even if most of our students are not listening, or maybe there's only one class where that happened, where they were listening to the audiobook instead of reading the book, or something like that.
Or
Well,
there is a situation where that is an accommodation that needs to be made for a
Right.
specific student.
For a specific student, that might be an accommodation, but we want to make sure that we understand, okay, we don't consider those things to be the same.
Okay. Well, and we have another meeting to get to, so I'm not
Yeah.
trying to call a question, but.
I have a question. So I think that the context of this presentation is really important. And I think that when I came in here, I was thinking about our last board meeting where we tabled a decision to buy Chromebooks. And we heard a presentation about how the more that we wait on that, the more we might put ourselves in a situation. We've heard that when we enact this type of change, it doesn't take months, it takes years. And so I think the context of this is there was so much information that was presented. It was a lot of good, I have a lot of questions. I'm looking forward to all those links because there's a lot of things that I got very curious about. And I think that this is a good place for us to start to begin to have that awareness, right? Because you have to start with awareness before you can ever get through the rest of it. But I really want to understand how within this presentation, we're going to get to a very practical point on Thursday where we have to make a decision to vote on Chromebooks and if we're changing that number. And that's what I loved all the recommendations that you got to, but I was looking for some guidance on that.
I don't think we can we? I mean,
I think we absolutely can. I mean, the number of Chromebooks that we have sitting on our shelf doesn't dictate the number of them we're going to use.
The amount of time they're used.
Right.
Right, I mean,
Fair enough.
it doesn't, because the reality is that in time, especially, if this shortage really, intensifies, in time, we may get to a place where we're like, if we really want our high schoolers at a 1-to-1, sure glad we bought those 550 Chromebooks, because we're getting to a spot where we might not be able to do that because of these shortages. So I don't see how the one has a direct impact upon the other.
right, when I said I don't think we can take all of the information that we learned, incorporate that into a decision that
No.
we make this week.
No,
We have to practice sound change management principles, and this isn't a Thursday thing, this is a long-term discussion for this board.
And that's why I think it's a good thing that we're talking, but also perhaps in our presentation, it was something that we didn't highlight because there is so much information.
Yeah.
To assuage fear, I don't believe that anything that is even a gen ask can happen overnight. These are long conversations with staff, with admin. This is just, now that we know some of the things that are happening, what direction as a district. And, you know, I learned for the first time, even just the layers of our comprehensive plan. I mean, it wasn't intuitive to me, I found this out on Monday, that the special education portion of that happens years before. That's hard to adapt a whole, now, a lot of that is requirements that we can't do anything about anyway. So the vast majority are things that are requirements, but it's not particularly intuitive to me, the way that we do that. I wonder if another thing I'd ask us to do is have that be on the same cycle. Because how do you marry the two if we're asking two things that are going in different, that frustrates me. But those sorts of changes can only happen because of conversations. So to your point, no, I don't think that anything in that presentation can be adopted by Thursday. No.
Can I ask an important question?
Sure.
You don't have any new business, do you?
I do not.
Okay.
Alrighty, I figured that we will probably have more discussion on Thursday, so let's go ahead and move on, unless somebody has something pertinent that they really need to get off their chests. Anybody? Thank you so much for
One
coming.
quick thing.
Yes, please.
Thank you, everybody, for the discussion on this, and
Hot topic.
yes, it is. I appreciate all the conversation and look forward to more, just not tonight.
Agreed, and I would say that we mirrored for our students how to have respectful, even disagreements. So thank you guys for that. Moving on to 3.04, other items of business, I have none. I will entertain a motion 5.01 for adjournment of the meeting.
So moved.
Second? All right, this meeting's adjourned.